Authoritarian Sociopathy, Toward a Renegade Psychological Experiment. Chapter 4. The Stanford Prison Experiment. The Stanford Prison Experiment was conducted in 1971 by Stanford psychologist Philip Zimbardo to study the psychological effects of being in a prison environment. It was funded by the U.S. Office of Naval Research in hopes of discovering the cause of conflict between military guards and prisoners. They aimed to determine whether it was the personality of the prisoners and guards or the environment itself that was the chief cause of abusive behavior in prison. 70 male students were screened, and the 24 most stable and psychologically healthy were selected as participants. They were intentionally excluded if they had a criminal background or a history of mental problems. Then, subjects were randomly assigned to the role of prisoner or guard to live in a 2-week-long prison simulation in the basement of the Stanford Psychology Building. Zimbardo acted as prison superintendent, and his undergraduate research assistant took on the role of warden. The experiment was designed to disorient, depersonalize, and de-individualize the participants. Certain portions of the experiment were filmed and are publicly available. In his book, The Lucifer Effect, Understanding How Good People Turn Evil, Zimbardo details his findings and how they relate to the torture of prisoners at Abu Ghraib. An orientation session was held for the guards before the experiment. They were instructed to keep a fixed schedule and to attempt to make the prisoners feel powerless and even to some degree afraid. The guards were to create a sense of arbitrariness to the system and to take away the prisoners' individuality. The guards were given uniforms from the local military surplus store, mirrored glasses to prevent eye contact, and wooden batons meant only to establish status. They were instructed to be creative, but not to physically harm the prisoners. The prisoners were arrested from their homes by the Palo Alto Police Department. They were given fictional armed robbery charges and taken through the full booking procedures, including mugshots and fingerprinting. The prisoners were handcuffed, chained around the ankles, and delivered to the mock prison, where they were strip-searched, dressed in ill-fitting smocks and stocking caps, and issued prisoner numbers. From then on, they were addressed only by their assigned numbers. Both prisoners and guards adapted to their new roles far beyond Zimbardo's expectations. Guards began to display cruel, even sadistic behavior, while prisoners quickly developed submissive attitudes, passively accepting physical and psychological abuse, and even readily following orders from the guards to inflict punishments on each other. On the second day, prisoners used their beds to barricade their cell door, and guards subdued them with fire extinguishers. The prisoners also engaged in a brief hunger strike. In response, the guards devised punishments for them, such as exercise drills, depriving them of bedding, forcing them to go nude, locking them in solitary confinement in a dark storage closet, and forcing prisoners to urinate and defecate in a bucket placed in their cell. Guards became increasingly sadistic as the experiment continued, and one prisoner began showing signs of mental breakdown after only 36 hours. The prisoners also engaged in horizontal discipline to keep each other in line, even without prompting from the guards. As Zimbardo explained, both prisoners and guards had fully internalized their fictional identities. In the end, only 2 prisoners quit the experiment early, even though they were all made aware that they could stop at any time. The levels of cruelty witnessed in the experiment were so severe that it was halted after only 6 days. Zimbardo says in his book that it should have been halted sooner, but his own judgment had been compromised by internalizing the prison superintendent identity. The experiment worked too well, and Zimbardo began to prioritize the continuation of the prison over the ethics of the experiment, allowing abuse to continue that could be considered torture. Most of the guards expressed disappointment when the experiment concluded early, while the prisoners expressed guilt for crimes they never committed. Zimbardo writes his own feelings of guilt, which kept him from publishing the full findings of the experiment for over 30 years. What is clear from both the Milgram experiment and the Stanford Prison Experiment is that abuse of authority and obedience to corrupt authority seems to be caused by the situation more than a result of their individual personalities.